Let's be very clear from the start. This is not about tactics. This is about the structural and, frankly, often irreversible nature of your early go-to-market decisions. We're here to examine the system you create, not the channels you happen to be using today. And here's the thing. Once that motion is locked in, your entire organization, who you hire, the metrics you track, your very culture, it all begins to harden around it. It stops being a choice. It becomes a foundational constraint that quietly dictates everything that comes next. So first, we have to reframe what we even mean by GTM Motion. It's not a playbook you download. It's a system. And it's a system that's designed for one thing above all else: learning. And this right here is the critical point. Your GTM Motion dictates the speed and the quality of market signals that reach your product and leadership teams. It fundamentally defines the kinds of problems your company is even structurally capable of solving. Think about it like this. A gravity well is an impersonal force, right? It just pulls everything into its orbit. Once it's established, your product roadmap, your financial model, your team structure, all of it will start to bend toward the center of this motion, whether it's the right one or not. So this naturally leads us to the core conflict inside every early-stage company, and that's this persistent, often invisible tension between a founder's internal narrative and the market's actual observable behavior. Look, founder optimism is a precondition. It's a requirement. Without that deep belief, that narrative, nothing would ever get built. But it becomes a massive liability when you start using it as a lens to interpret market signals. Demand reality isn't a story. It's just a set of constraints and behaviors. It really doesn't care about your intent. And confusing these two, mistaking the story you're telling for the signal you're receiving, that is the primary source of these early, systemic, and often fatal go-to-market errors. They're simply not the same kind of input. So if this is so critical, how do so many companies get it wrong? Well, the answer is that most GTM motions aren't chosen deliberately at all. They're inherited. They just sort of emerge from the circumstances and the intense pressure of the early days. So how is this fundamental operating system for learning and growth actually put in place? The answer, in almost every single case, is that it isn't. It's not a conscious choice. Your go-to-market motion is an emergent property of all that early frantic activity. It's not the product of some detached strategic thinking. These things are really just the path of least resistance. You know, the founder's background, the playbook that your first sales hire brings with them. These things become the default motion. And this drift, it feels harmless because nothing breaks right away. It just feels like you're making progress. And here's the really dangerous part. This drift, it doesn't lead to some big, dramatic, visible implosion. Instead, it creates a condition that's much, much worse. A silent failure. A systemic decay that's completely masked by the appearance of motion. You have to understand this distinction. A failing motion will still generate meetings. It will generate demos. It might even generate some early revenue. And that little bit of success is often the most dangerous signal a founder can get because it provides just enough validation to put off a painful but necessary correction. So the visible activity is always masking a hidden cost. You see the pipeline growing, but the hidden cost is that your learning velocity is near zero. You see some early revenue coming in, but your unit economics are completely unsustainable. The team feels confident, but the company isn't actually converging on a repeatable model that reflects what the market wants. So that's the pathology. The real failure isn't that things aren't moving, it's the absence of correction. The system can't self-correct because all these misleading signals give it no reason to. The feedback loop is fundamentally broken. Okay, so you might be thinking, why not just change it later? Well, because by the time you realize the motion is wrong, it has become permanently embedded in your organization's DNA. You've walked right into the irreversibility trap. This lock-in process is methodical. First, that accidental motion is set by those early constraints. Then you hire people specifically for that motion. Next, you build out all your metrics and your comp plans to reward it. And finally, you create a company narrative that justifies why it's the right one. The system is now fully reinforcing itself. And that is why it becomes irreversible. A pivot feels like a new strategy. But changing your core GTM motion, that feels like a public admission that the company's foundational premise, and by extension, the leadership's judgment, was just wrong from the start. That's a psychological barrier very few teams are willing to cross. So what's the way out of this? It's not a tactic. It's a principle.
It's about establishing a clear, hard boundary between the role of belief and the role of validation.
Belief is the energy source. It's the precondition for doing anything hard. It's what helps you start. But validation, that's information. It is the raw, unfiltered signal from the market, and it has to be the sole input for your strategic decisions. It's what helps you build something that actually lasts. They are two different tools for two very different jobs. A lot of teams think they can just hire a great product marketer to fix this problem. They can't. Product marketing is an act of translation, and it can only work effectively once the GTM motion is correct and the system is actually stable. Without that stability, product marketing just becomes narrative damage control, trying to tell a story that papers over a broken system. And this is the point to really let sink in. Your go-to-market is not a flexible menu of options that you can test and swap out. It is a sequence of irreversible commitments, and each one narrows the possibilities for your future. And that's the prerequisite. Getting the GTM motion right is the foundation for everything else. In our next explainer, we're going to explore the true role of product marketing, not as messaging, but as an act of precise translation inside a system that has finally found its stable, correct motion.